Hello, everyone. So the sound didn't work, but it looks like the slideshow did. Okay. So basically, I had that rigged in case, because it was supposed to auto-start, but someone, not gonna name names, not gonna indicate anyone, suddenly needed to go garden. And so I basically did the whole thing of, right, now set this up, and let's see if it works. Because I've been bugging for a while that I didn't have anything to start up and have going in case I was running about a minute or 6 seconds late and I would leave you all hanging. So, yeah, the slideshow seemed to work, I think. I think you saw the pictures changing over. But the sound, there was no music. We will sort out the music. Music will be there. Please note, I know we like to do the whole things for a certain someone to get something, but he's not allowed at the moment because he's got some high calorific dinner over there, which he is supposed to be eating to rebuild his strength after surgery, and instead he would like to eat his body weight in you know what. So, no. You can put all the messages to him that you love to put in the chat, but he's not getting anything. As much as he can read them. Cute boy. Oh no, well unless you think he needs to go to get food, he should go with you. I'll have him go back. Okay, well if you think that's better, because he's already trying to milk the audience for bickies and, you know, basically going, I'm Bufu, love me. Hello, there you go. No. And the thing is, you're not allowed to. You've got to eat your medically prescribed food. You've got to eat your medically prescribed food, but as you can all see, he is better. Go on. Go over my sissy. You can stay here all you like, but you know, you're not going to get anything. You're gorgeous. Yes, I do love you.
Karen treat. Yes, yeah. Karen needs treats.
Yes, there's lots of KTs coming through. Tanif and others. Go on. There you go. Ay, caramba. What it is to have a sick poodle. And my mic keeps redlining today. So, this is the weird thing. When I'm doing this to a recording, it will come through same settings as me being quiet as anything. And then now, I'm live, and the settings are redlining. Literally redlining. And there are missed frames, and the RAM's overworking, and the CPUs. Oh, please, Lord, let the paychecks come through so I have enough money for the new parts this weekend. Okay, for those who haven't seen the video I did yesterday, I did explain that basically I am close to having enough money to getting all the new parts needed to get the new PC working. And it's a case of, if the paychecks come through from the various companies which owe me money on time, then next week, maybe even by Sunday, I will have a new PC, and it will be working properly. And I will no longer be beating this poor defenseless laptop, which is just tired and wants to be let to retire with dignity. It's terrible. It's cruelty of me. Now, today, before we get into this... before we get into this too much, I should point out, I'm going to be quoting from a couple of journal articles in this presentation. Because they're good journal articles. You can find them on JSTOR. You can read them for free. You just can't download them for free. You can if you have a University Access account. That usually works. The other, of course, books are Warships After Washington by John Jordan and Warships After London by John Jordan. Don't take me wrong. These are very, very good books, but honestly, this is published first, and then this one's published, and you sit there and go, you have managed to make yourself a franchise. You have managed to make yourself a franchise. Don't overwork yourself. I'm not overworking myself, but I'm trying to get as many articles done and things done as I possibly can, and they'll be published over the next couple of months, hopefully, and you'll see a load of articles appear, and you'll go, Alex, why did articles appear? Well, some of them were free. Not so free articles. Okay. USB signal decided to go for the camera. I'm guessing that has affected you all, and my screen has frozen. Let's see. That's still working, but screen has frozen. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Potentially, if I turn that off, or rather, if I move that, turn that off, restart, my dear OBS, restart, OBSBot, restart. Very good. It's still frozen. Oh, great. So the camera's getting the signal, but the OBSBot isn't working. Well, let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do with the video capture device portion of this discussion. And right then. Hey, it's working now. It's just gone a bit weird in the positioning. Yay, it's back to where it was. Now stay. Stay. Apologies about that. Small technical error involving a laptop going, ah! So, leadership of the 1930 London Naval Treaty is today's topic for discussion. And honestly, I want to do this because it's so different from the Washington Treaty. Okay, in the Washington Treaty, I would be talking about lots of big names. Everyone's sending a group. There's all these different factors involved. I've talked about the senators and etc. And people trying to, Friday night quarterback it, Monday morning quarterback it, or all the various other phrases that can be used for backseat driving it. All the different factions playing in, all different people working together, and then suddenly you have the London Naval Treaty. And by its very nature, they shut down a lot of the other people who could be involved. Yes, I am going to have to upgrade the laptop, but I'm also going to have to replace it. Honestly, I think I have to replace it before we go to Japan. I have to replace my phone before I go to Japan. My phone is an easy replace, though, because I need a new contract. But the laptop is going to be... I have going to have bills for the next few months, and I know I'm going to have bills. Because I have let all my tech get a bit too old. I have let... it happens. I've let all my tech get a bit too old, and with moving house and all these things, and it's just... When I say I've let it go too old, I have used it too much for too long, and I know how hard I am on the stuff. But getting back to the leadership of 1930 London Naval Treaty, it's very much politics taking the lead. It's very much politics taking the lead. And what do I mean by politics taking the lead? Well, if we consider this lovely quote from Connor's Reed book, which is published in 1949, okay? So in 1949, there is a really interesting thing, because if you talk to people post-World War II, about 1946 to about 1955, they will tell you that Britain won the naval treaties. That Britain really benefited from them. And Britain was the standout leader. The perception which we've had to deal with up until the 1990s, from about the mid-1950s to the 1990s, that America won the naval treaties, is something which happens in a lot of, how do I put this, post-Suez crisis analysis. It's very much a post, the world's changing, oh, America won this. And it's an interesting thing there to think about. Therefore, there is the perception of you won short term to medium term maybe, but long term, maybe you didn't win. And nowadays we look back and go, well, actually, Britain did win, but the trouble is then Britain received the 2-1 punch very quickly afterwards of the Great Depression, then the World War II, and then the Americans deciding to end the whole financial basis of running World War II overnight with no warning. And all those three things built up based on also the legacy of World War I meant boom! But one of the interesting things that's pointed out in quite a few works, is that Britain wasn't as badly affected by the Great Depression as America and Canada and some other countries. Because Britain hadn't had the massive post-World War I boom, so it didn't have as far to bust because it hadn't boomed as much. And Germany, which of course had boomed the most, was busted the most. But it was politics taking the lead. And this is a quote from Connor's Reed's work in... It's in the Proceedings of American Philosophical Society. It's more light on the London Naval Treaty of 1930. And it's this. Macdonald's visit to America was in the nature of a triumphant procession from the moment he set foot in New York until something like a week later when he left for Canada. The high point was the weekend spent with Mr. Hoover at his camp in Rapidon. Those present on the British side were, besides the Prime Minister, Sir Robert Vansittart, acting as Macdonald's private secretary, and R.L. Clarke, chief of the American division of the British Foreign Office. On the American side, beside Mr. Hoover himself, were Mr. Secretary Stinson and Joseph P. Cotton, American Undersecretary of State. There were no stenographers present, and no naval experts. Conversations were quite informal, and the only public statement which emerged from the conference was a joint press release from the White House, 10th October 1929, which is a masterpiece of amiable ambiguities. It really is. By the way, if you want to read a press conference, a press release, which is absolutely wonderful in saying so much yet absolutely nothing at all. Nothing at all. Go look up that press release. It is perfecto. In terms of international relations and management, there are many nations today, many leaders today, who could learn a thing or two from being able to produce a press release which allows everyone in the world to read whatever they want into it, yet says nothing at all, so will confirm and deny nothing. Now, okay, sorry, I'm just reading some of the chat, and there are people complaining. I'm thinking this is a shark VTuber is being complained about, so it's gotta be Gurugwa. You're complaining about has turned up in your 40k memes. Well, you know, let's be honest. The sharks have always been some of the people's favorite Space Marines. Add in Gura going off somewhere. You know she's going off to lead them. Anyway, leaving that to one side, at the other side. The politics really does take the lead. In this scenario, what we are talking about in the 1930 London Naval Treaty is the most politically led, politically focused treaty in terms of armaments and defense that there ever has been and ever was. They didn't just deny the naval personnel and senior civil servants as well access to the room when they made this treaty. They didn't even consult them in many regards. They didn't involve them at all. Now, what I would say usually in this scenario is if there was far more politically powerful First Sea Lords, etc., as there had been, this couldn't have been done while Beatty was First Sea Lord. This could not have been done. Why? Beatty's got too much political clout. Beatty could have caused the government to suffer serious problems over this. The Labour government was horrendously short on support as it was. It was a coalition government being propped up by the Liberals, and they really did want to be backseat driving. So, yeah. Welcome to the world of 1930s politics. But realistically, it was also the only way to get a treaty through. Because every time you started to try and do a treaty with the naval experts involved and the specialists involved, they'd bring up problems like facts and geography and the reality of your strategic situation and how, as much as you wished the world was getting more and more peaceful and everyone was loving and everyone cared about each other and no one wished to go to war, and the only wars you'd ever have to fight were wars you chose to fight, and you never choose to fight them unless someone was being very stupid a long way away from home and they were very small, so it'd be a very quick war which would just bring you glory and no problems. Yeah. The people who bring up the problems with that. So in simple terms, there's probably no room for anyone who's in the chat here. Because I can guarantee anyone who's watching a history video on a Thursday evening, let alone on YouTube, let alone on Twitch, with someone chatting about naval history and the 1930s London Naval Treaty leadership of it, leadership of the 1930s London Naval Treaty, are going to be from the squad who might not be called awkward squad, apart from if you're the kind of boss who requires people to be yes people all the time, but you stick up their hand and go, "Excuse me, are we sure we've considered that fact? Excuse me, are you quite certain? Excuse me, what are you basing this analysis in? Where's your evidence coming from?" And when I say that things get interesting, I mean things get really interesting. One of the things you find with the ongoing London Naval Treaty is that, in many ways, Britain and America, the British and American politicians, not Britain and America, the government, sorry, not even British America, the governments or the nations, Britain and America, the political leaders of the nation, stitch their countries up. You've probably heard me talk about the cruiser gap. You've heard me talk about destroyer gaps and other problems in terms of numbers. Well, by the way, it's the politicians who agree all this in this period, and mostly they agree it behind closed doors in meetings like this one when MacDonald visited America. And by the way, the Americans were just as bad. The two key powers they had to get online were Britain and America. The American politicians presumed as long as you got Britain involved, other powers would join. Britain refused to join unless France and Japan were in it. France refuses to join unless Italy's in it. America doesn't really understand this, but yes, they have to be involved in it a lot. Because for Britain, it was about more than just Britain versus America. That is one of the problems you do perceive in this scenario. The Americans are obsessed with the British in this scenario and not being surpassed. They are obsessed with having a navy second to none. they're not really thinking about what they need that Navy for. In other words, it's a clue that there's no one in the room who's actually a naval officer or actually understands what navies do. Because they're thinking it entirely apart from the fact of, you have this many battleships, I have to have this many battleships. You have this much tonnage of cruisers, I need more cruisers! It's depressingly childish. It's depressingly childish. But it's life. Stephanie Paget. I tuned in onto the stream for the first time in years and immediately got outed as a dork by Dr. Clarke. Not so much a dork as someone who's going to be asking questions. And the nicest way, you don't watch a live stream of naval history where I respond to the chat if you're not the sort who likes to ask questions and whose brain isn't going to be turned on. And as I will tell you, as a lifelong sufferer of my brain actually being turned on, if your brain is turned on, you tend to ask questions. Whether you want to or not, they just come out. Because your brain starts nagging you. I don't know about everyone else here, but my brain will literally listen to someone and go, they haven't thought that through. Are you going to ask them? And it's rude, we're in a meeting. They're carrying on. They're carrying on. They still haven't noticed their problem. Just shut up, shut up, shut up. It would be like, I could be accused of having voices in my head if it came on when there was no one else there speaking away. But it's not. It's my little conscience in the back of my brain going to my, basically setting both sides of the argument in my head as to whether I should actually interrupt this person. And we all know we have it. So, this is the world that we are talking about. They are very concerned with getting a peace treaty. And they have different reasons for why. And so before we get to the shameless book plug, I'm going to talk about the various governments and their leaders and why they have these reasons for pushing for these treaties. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about the people negotiating it and the people how they get involved in it. And the really interesting thing is in some of their cases, we're talking about the exact same person. Because they have so few people they can call upon. I mean, France is particularly bad at this, but they're not the only one. There's also this guy, Ramsay MacDonald, and you can tell what kind of coalition government he's leading by the fact he has to go everywhere himself. And by the fact that how quickly his government fractures in August 1930. Because of, well, a guy called Henderson. Not Admiral Henderson for once. This is one of those few things. I'm going to be talking about a Henderson in this discussion. It's Arthur Henderson. And he's a very interesting Labour Party leader. Interestingly enough, he is an ardent pacifist. He is the complete opposite of Reginald Henderson, who's an ardent, I want to have all the equipment, it's got to be well designed, and that can allow me to deter conflict. Arthur Henderson honestly believes that you can unilaterally disarm your way to peace. Which you sort of can, because you'll get taken over by someone else, especially in the 1930s. But we'll leave that to one side. Why do they need a peace treaty when none of them is at war? Well, basically the whole idea of these treaties is to try and prevent war. Prevent a war, because Britain and America won't go to war if their forces are exactly the same size, and they won't have to spend money on building ships if their forces are exactly the same size, will they? So they can spend money on other things. That's what both sides wanted, to spend money on other things. So let's talk about Great Britain. Well, Ramsay MacDonald's government contains a various battle between a lot of people who fervently believe in peace, up to and beyond what is necessarily a good idea. Because I believe in peace. I would much prefer peace. because I know the cost of war. But I also know that usually you're going to have more likely have peace through a healthy respect for each other and a modicum of deterrence than you are through disarming yourself and then standing there in the middle of the street. Because let's be honest, nations aren't like people. This is where the whole thing of you can be a pacifist person but not a pacifist nation sort of starts to come in. Because if you're a person and a pacifist, if you get hurt, you can call the police. Okay, if someone attacks you, you can call the police. You are able to be a pacifist because of the rule of law, which prescribes in your community, in your civilization where you live, where people respect things, where they have a common currency for exchange, and all these things take place within this sort of framework, which is established usually by the state, which does maintain a police force, which are not a pacifist organization. They don't go looking for violence. The police do not go looking for violence. But they will meet violence with violence. Controlled violence. They are a deterrence. That is the thing. You as an individual are able to be a pacifist in a modern society, in a civilized society, because of there being another group who are there to provide the deterrent factor. For a nation state, being a pacifist nation, you have two choices. Switzerland, where you have sufficient firepower that you scare the bejesus out of all your neighbours when they actually seriously think about anything involving military action you. Sweden is also similarly inclined. Or you, well, I would be cruel and say you could go Norway, but let's not be that cruel. Or you can go completely disarmed as pacifist nation and just proclaim, no one invade me because I'm a pacifist nation. And that usually works until we get into the next round of recessions, and there is anyone nearby who happens to be modicumly interested in exploiting your tax base. You have to remember the great thing of why did the kings of Scotland so covet the English throne? Because it had a better tax base than the Scottish one. And why did the Act of Union end up getting passed between Scotland and England? Because the Scottish had been far more anti-taxation than the English, and so their government was going bankrupt. And that was the honest truth. And now, admittedly, it had been bankrupted based on faulty investments and bad decisions taken by its own ministers. And you can say, well, a country can't really go bankrupt. Well, in that period, a country could go bankrupt. Why can't a modern country really go bankrupt? Because they tend to have Banks of England, a lender of last resort, and they tend to have a mature taxation system, neither of which Scotland had at that point. So when people start spinning to me the modern phraseology of countries going to go bankrupt, so that's a fallacy, I look at them and go, no, we're talking about a country several hundred years ago. It's a different scenario. But in this case, we have Great Britain. We have Arthur and Henderson, who's this gentleman off to the side, and we have Ramsay MacDonald, this gentleman. Now, they are as close of friends as you can get. They really are in political terms. They are allies. They are brothers. They truly are. Henderson is his strong right hand when it comes to foreign policy. Henderson is the type of guy who goes to talk about the International Peace Conference and is talking about bringing peace to the world, about how we need to disarm, how we need to get rid of weapons of war, all those things. Henderson is the sort of man who would be absolutely apoplectic over the modern dual-use technologies because they were causing enough trouble in his time, let alone the ones today. Dual-use technologies being caused things like planes, which could be rapidly converted into bomber aircraft, or transports, all sorts of things which caused him to be worried. Now, the problem you have with them that eventually does cause them to disunite is the whole policy over the Great Depression. And the fact is, MacDonald ends up having to run a government of national unity to get through the Depression, which involves conservatives and liberals, and therefore gets himself kicked out of the Labour Party. And he gets kicked out of the Labour Party by Henderson. Why? Because Henderson wanted to cut military spending, cut all sorts of things, in order to preserve unemployment payment benefits. And you could argue that's a good idea. They needed to probably keep them going and boost them. He also was intrigued. He was also good for nationalism and all sort of nationalisation of things and so all sorts of things. I would say you must notice that it's the Labour Party which Oswald Mosley is kicked out of in January 1930 for similar issues. But the thing is, the big problem you have here is that Britain had a massive cruiser program already planned and funded. They had all sorts of destroyer builds they needed to do, all sorts of construction programs they needed to get involved in to up their fleet numbers, without even touching capital ships. And that had all been signed away by the London Naval Treaty. So, the thing is, you're dealing with a situation which has been made worse by their own decision-making process. And their process fundamentally comes down to, and their thought process is, that there were the three pillars, and it's three pillars which basically join them together. One, there will never be another war because the Great War was so horrific, so terrible, there'd never be another one. Two, there'll never be another war because we will disarm to a level at which war will not be possible, so no one will ever have to fight one. And three, this is where you get in the problem. Now, this is where you sometimes get accusations of communism coming in here, but remember, these are socialists. They are not communist. There is a difference. I realize that I sometimes get into this debate online with people who are trying to argue that they're the same thing. They're not. Okay? We'll be talking about the various ideologies. It's just like, conservatism is not fascism, etc. We'll be talking about them, because all the ideologies start to play their games in this period because of the decisions being made. And most of the decisions being made are because of the final one. We have grown out of war. We are moving towards a better future, a promised land, a global utopia. There are even discussions of a global government at this time. The idea of uniting everyone on the entire planet under one government, one beneficent government, which is going to take the world forward into a bright, sunny uplands of happiness and peace and prosperity. I do like that joke, Mark Harkness. Democracy is two wolves discussing dinner. Peace is a well-armed sheep. Peace is usually a flock of sheep with some poodles hidden in them, which turn out to be wolves in sheep clothing. And the wolves go, "Oh, frigate, that thing's got jaws and is jumping at me. And there's another one, and another one." That's what peace is. So yeah, they have lots of ideas about bringing peace to the world. And they're not all the same. Please note, not all of them belong to all three of those designs. In fact, very few of them belong to more than one. But they're united because they have vision of a peaceful world. And that's not a bad thing. I said, having a vision of a peaceful world is a great thing. I would love there to be a peaceful world. I'd love it to be the fact that when I'm talking about war, I'm a historian and only a historian. But the trouble is, I am a historian. And I know human nature. And I have studied it long enough to know that we don't change. As much as I wish we would, we don't. We might be clothed better than we used to. we might have more fancy technology. We might have fun gadgets which run out of power, like Fitbit watches. We might have all sorts of things which we have today, which we didn't have in the past. We might have Discord. We might have YouTube, which is 20 years old soon. We might have all these things. But that doesn't make us any less prone to arguing with our neighbour than we were in the past. Doesn't make us any less prone. In fact, you can argue, and I have seen someone who made this argument, that people were more polite in times when everyone carried a sword. Please note, they said sword, not gun. There's a reason for this. If you're carrying a sword, if you're going to kill someone, you have to look them dead in the eyes when you're doing it. Or you stab them from behind, in which case you look like a coward. But if you're carrying a gun, you pull it out and you just go bang bang. So this thing means everyone's got a sword on them as a reminder that, well, you know, I can defend myself, so can they. So it's better to be polite. Because otherwise I'm going to have to look in his eyes as I kill him. It's not my theory, please note, it's a friend of mine's theory. But it's a good one. Because it kind of does explain the whole chivalry period. Then we have America. The government of President Herbert Hoover. Well, now, it's often marketed that he put forward about the peace treaty. He started these discussions. And potentially, yes, there is some, but there's a lot of people pushing for it at the same time. And this is the point. There's a lot of people pushing for this because this is the great thought. Think about this. This is 9 years before World War II breaks out and everyone's singing, peace in our time, peace forever. The world is going to be peaceful. Where does this come from? You know, the amount of times I'm told by people that the end of history doctrine and the idea that the world was going to be peaceful at the end of the Cold War comes from nowhere and it's this completely irrational thing. I go, no, it's not. Humans have many times in history. Guess what? Said the same thing, and you can go back to the after Napoleonic Wars. And guess what? There are people saying the same thing. It's beautiful. It's roughly every 100 years people think they've conquered war. It's great. Someday they might be right, but I doubt it's going to be anytime soon. Now, here's the quote again from Connie Reed. Again from the same source I talked about earlier. Parities between the US and Britain on submarines and destroyers could only be achieved by large-scale scrapping on the part of the US, and this could only be predicated on equally drastic action by Britain regarding cruisers. As he estimated it, the total cruiser tonnage of Britain, in service, in construction, and authorised amounted to 402,800 tons, as against a total of about 300,000 tons of the US. The gap, as Stinson observed, was a wide one, hardly to be bridged by the mere application of a yardstick. It became therefore a question as to what level of parity in cruisers should be in a word. Would the US have to build up, or would Britain scrap? This, as Stinson observed, was the issue on which the Geneva Conference had founded. Now, here's the thing for Hoover. The really important thing for Hoover is that others have been trying to get the Washington Treaty extended. There have been negotiations in Geneva. And by the way, one of the reasons why they're keeping naval personnel out of these negotiations, and the experts out of these negotiations, is because those very same naval people were causing so many difficult questions, no one could come to an agreement in Geneva. Because, for some reason, the naval personnel on both sides when they said, we want parity, not just in terms of capital ships, but in terms of destroyers, submarines, and cruisers, the naval experts asked, what do you mean by parity? What do you mean? Tell me, what do you mean? What do you mean by parity? And it turned out Britain and America had different things. Britain's view was, well, America should be allowed to build up to the same level as Britain has. Because Britain needs a number of cruisers to defend its empire. And America's view was Britain should scrap ships until it's the same level as America is. Because Congress doesn't want to pay for them. You notice a common recurring theme whenever I talk about treaties, how you can argue Britain won the treaties because they was banking on the fact that Congress would never pay for the US Navy to have the number of ships they were allocated. Well, they're right. Continually right. And if you want to know how they know they're going to be right on this, well, just look at this conference negotiation from Geneva. Where literally the whole thing is the US going, but we can't build up that much, so you're going to have to scrap. And the Royal Navy, Britain going, we're not going to scrap because we need these cruisers build up this much. And they're going, and the US Navy going, Congress will never give us that money. And the Royal Navy are going, well, that's not our fault. You have to persuade them. It's not our job. It's yours. And the US Navy going, we're going to cry. Send me some ice cream and give me some of your beer. Now. And no, it's not the Royal Navy causing them to cry. It's not me causing them to cry if anyone gets upset. It's their own Congress. So if anyone gets mad with me over that line, go get mad with the 1920s Congress. They're the ones you should be mad with, not me. I'm just telling you what happened. And the trouble is, who has also got the problem that all the presidents, all these politicians have been promising the American people a navy second to none and parity with the Royal Navy since the end of World War I. They've been promising parity of the Royal Navy for nearly 14 years by this point, because it happened with the election. It was in the part of the election campaign going on. They've been promising that for that long, and they still ain't got it. Why? Because Congress won't fund it. Now the thing is, here's the disturbing thing, as this points out, the Americans actually had more submarines and more destroyers than the Brits did at this point. And they were honestly worried that their government would agree to scrap their vessels rather than as a parts agreement to let the British have the British scrap their cruisers. The US Navy was seriously worried about that. They were literally putting their faith in the Royal Navy to prevent that happening. And then they find themselves, both navies are cut out of negotiations completely. I realise some of you have questions in the chat about which ships are the best treaty breakers and these things, and I'll get to those questions at the end when I do the general questions at the end. Questions about the slides on sort of specific topics I'm on, I'll answer as the slides are up, but, you know, general questions I'll answer at the end. And so, this is the problem you're dealing with for the Americans. Their government's been promising things to the public, they just can't deliver, and they won't deliver. And they're not even the ones in the worst positions. Oh, and let me just put this away. By the way, Japan, not in the worst position at this point. Really not. They're being run quite sensibly. In 1930, they've got a fairly decent leadership, which is making a lot of good economic decisions. And for them, the London Naval Treaty is all part of a two-phase economic plan. So is the stream buffering? It possibly is. I'm sorry, it shouldn't be, but yeah, the laptop just gets overloaded by everything and can't keep up. Basically, eventually the RAM gets overloaded, so I've got to boost the RAM on the laptop and I've got to fix the PC. If I do this, you'll hear why it keeps having trouble. You should be hearing the wonderful sound of the fans overheating. And yes, I have taken a laptop apart, cleaned it and put it back together again, and tested it all. It's all fine, it's just old. So, the Japanese government at this point is Hamaguchi Osaki, who unfortunately will die in a not too distant future, and his government will fall before then. He is a very capable Prime Minister who is pushing for fiscal austerity and is trying to rebuild the Japanese economy. He's been supported by Sanjay Kinomochi, who's a general. As I've talked about in other videos before about Japan, Genro are these... How do I put this politely? Look, there is almost a celestial court and a celestial government of Japan at this point, and the public one. This is the Prime Minister of the public one. This is the leader of the celestial one. Okay? You have the Emperor, who's the head of state, but cannot get involved in the grubby business of politics. He has these... Some would call them acknowledged friends, others acknowledged mouthpieces. I've done a whole video where I've talked about Genro and talking about Mitsumasa Yonai, so please go to that video. There might even be a link posted below in the comments if someone's being very kind, quickly to put it in the put it so I can pin it below in the comments. So that, you know, where these people are powerful, but they're not officially powerful. But realistically, they are incredibly powerful. They're powerful enough that you might be planning a military coup. You will go for him. You won't touch that one unless you're very stupid. Basically, you can get away with killing him. You go after him, the people who will come for you will make an example of your family for 7 generations each way. There is a level here. This one needs to have bodyguards to walk around. This one probably walks around without bodyguards and goes, "Hello, everyone." Now, for them, the London Naval Treaty gives them a chance to curb some of the military spending and to stop some of the build-up. But it's problematic, because if it's handled well, it gives them this space to build up the national economics and infrastructure. If it's handled badly, and unfortunately there are a lot of junior ministers and naval officers that are trying to get involved who will handle it badly, it's going to cause a mess. So yes, they want to handle it very close to their chest. Pretty much every single one of these governments is handling it very close to them, very much in the hands of the politicians for different reasons. We have, don't trust the rest of the nation. We have, oh my god, we're trying to do this without getting Congress involved, because do you know the mess they'll make it? And the Navy will actually ask difficult questions, which will mean we'll have to deal with the rest of the nation because of the promises made to the public. And we want peace. And we think we don't want to spend money on our forces, so they're also the government which starts the policy of paying yards and things to close down. So yeah, they're full of bright sparks. What can I say? The Labour government of the 1930s is full of imaginative ideas to solutions, which is good because they're actually trying to solve problems. The trouble is, those imagined ideas are bright ideas. Please note, here's the difference between what people ask me questions often why I talk about the bright idea theory and why I'm so disdainful of it when, you know, I'm a historian. I deal with ideas all the time. Okay, an idea is when you have a thought in your head and you go, "Ooh, this might work." A plan is when you've worked it out on paper. An actual solution is when you've tested it, refined it with real-world data, debated with other people, and then turned it into something which works. But the problem is if you take the bright idea, don't bother to tell to anyone who might disagree with you, and just implement it without checking it, then that's when you have problems. When you take the bright idea as the kernel thing, you work on it, develop it, and turn it into something which is an actual solution, that's when it's useful. That's when it's good. And that's the differential. A bright idea is something you implement without thinking through and actually doing any testing. A solution is a bright idea you've tested and worked out so you can actually solve the problem. There is a difference there. It's a big difference. Use a box fan to help cool it. There are many options I'm considering for this poor laptop, but hopefully I have enough money at the end by Friday by tomorrow some point with paychecks coming in to order the other components and build the new PC. That's the plan. So fingers crossed. If not for paychecks, for anyone who funds super chat, super thanks, and all the Ko-fi donations and other things that come from this channel, we'll hope something comes through. Simplified. Bright idea not equal to a solution, but solution contains a bright idea. Yeah. Then we have Italy. Okay. So if you not recognize him, this is Mussolini, aka Fat Boy Fun Boy, the less improved World War II edition. Italian World War II edition. There is also Fat Boy Fun Boy, the German, the far less improved German, much improved German edition, aka Göring. We'll leave that to one side. In this picture, he's about to march on Rome. I think that's his picture is from. But I would also say it looks like he's constipated. I'm not sure if I'd been managing his image profile or anything like that, I would not allow him to have that photo taken, because let's consider it. If I go and stand here and I stand like this, I put my legs down so you can be seen, and do this. I look like I'm holding one in, don't I? I do. I look like I'm holding one in, and so does he. It just... Yeah, they're serious about the fate of the nation, I suppose. But they all look, to me, like they are holding one in. Anyway, Il Duce has one plan in life and one plan only. That is to make Italy great again. To bring back Mare Nostrum, our sea, the Mediterranean, as being an Italian lake. Basically reforged the Roman Empire anew. He wants to take over large chunks of the world. This is why poor Somalia ends up getting taken over and a few other things. Eventually. But at this point, he's trying his great statesman routine. Now, as the self-appointed not only leader of the nation, but Minister of the Navy and Minister of the Air Force, he has great plans for the modernization of the fleet. He also has to deal with a lot of senior officers in the fleet who are not happy on him when he's trying to get rid of things. And this is his problem. One of the things that happens, interesting enough, is when he signs up to these treaties, Italy doesn't lose his stuff. Italy does sign stuff away. Italy does accept limitations. And you can actually argue that one of the nations most badly affected by this, again, is Italy. Because they are already a nationalist socialist government. They're already a fascist government. And Mussolini would have loved to be able to start using shipbuilding as some of the big projects to employ lots of people. But he couldn't because of the treaty he'd signed. Thanks, Stephen. Thank you, Paul Amos. And this is the reality of what we're dealing with. he wants a great and powerful Italy, but he also doesn't want to have to pay for it. He wants to be a statesman on the world stage, so he'll sign up to anything. Honestly, the man is an attention-seeking publicity. WH*RE. He absolutely is. He is one of the most attention-seeking egotists you'll ever see on the world stage. You set up an international conference, he'll want to be part of it. He'll want to have a representative there because it's important to the status of Italy as a great nation. I mean, you wonder where Hitler gets his ideas of what a great nation should do. I swear it comes from reading this guy's pronouncements of what a great nation should be. People often wonder what is the effect of Mussolini on Hitler. I would say it's the imagery of a great nation. It is the imagery of a great nation. And that's the point. He tells the world what's going to happen, not Italy gets told what to happen. And I'm sorry, but I cannot look at this photo without thinking he needs the toilet. I know I keep saying, I've said this already, but seriously, look at this. I'm just going to expand it to all for you. Look at that. Tell me that is not a man holding one in. He's either holding in the loudest escape of gas ever known to mankind, because he's had a very, very spicy or vegetable-based lunch. Or, alternatively, he really needs to go to the loo. And look at the faces of some of those guys around him. Look at what think about what's going through their minds. Interestingly enough, you want to look at the guy on the left of his shoulder, slightly to his on the left of the image as we look at Mussolini. That's going to be a powerful face we're going to be talking about soon. That is going to be a powerful face we're going to be talking about soon. But yeah, El Duce. One guy. Permanently constipated. And oh, by the way, if you want to look up I swear, and this is a complete aside, but this is just a thing for you all. Okay, so I spent rather a lot of today, because of the key leaders video, which is coming out tomorrow, looking at the Italian chiefs of naval staff and chief naval officers, and the current one, I swear, is the best dressed, most movie star lookalike admiral I have seen in my life. Go look him up. He makes George. He is the living admiral equivalent of George Clooney. I swear. I don't know where he's found the never-ending youth serum, but he's got it. Okay. If you've got a free time after this video is over, go look up the current chief of the Italian naval staff. You will literally be sat there looking at it going, "You're an admiral? Seriously? What happened? You have no stress lines at all." Now we have the case that is France, okay? So, France at this point has a Protestant for president. Always a fun scenario for them. It really is. It's very rare. They have governments doing roundabouts. Their governments are permanent coalitions. Look, I often say that anyone who spends 20 minutes studying the French history from the 1920s and 30s develops a deep and passionate loathing for anything which involves proportional representation because of because of the sheer amount of government instability. And the fact that you can never hold governments to anything. You can never hold it because it's a permanently rotating dustbin of coalitions. There are lots of people currently looking up the Italian chief of staff and just going, "Oh my lord!" Yeah, look at him. He is the best looking one I have seen in the seriously. I just looked, I was looking at it today going, "Oh my god, he looks better than me." He's got a decade on me and he looks better. This is not fair. Oh. Anyway. So, there is some stability, but as said, it comes from a Protestant president called Pierre-Paul Henry Gaston de Maugeir. And, well, he was president from June 1924 to June 1931. And he's an ardent socialist. He's very, very, very socialist. And he's actually, the presidency sort of gives them stability. So you'd have these rotating frameworks of prime ministers and their coalitions, and the coalition would fall apart after 5 minutes, sometimes after 10 days. And then there'd be a new prime minister, and then they might fall apart again 10 days later, and there'd be the old prime minister back, or maybe a new one entirely. It's just constant merry-go-round. And you have the president above that as this sort of position of stability. And to be honest, Pierre-Paul Henry Gaston de Maugeir is probably one of the most beloved politicians in France at this time, and does give them stability. He actually gets married in office, and what I love is he's considered not unusual. He has a lot of breakfast dates with this lovely lady professor, who he ends up marrying before he leaves office. And I love the phrase of, they're having a breakfast date. And you're going, yeah. So she's having breakfast in the presidential palace. Do we imagine she came from home to get breakfast, to then go teach at the university? Or what do we think? But, of course, he's a president, so it's perfectly normal and no one cares about it. Team Ulocca, the Italian admiral must have a really hard Italian diet. Honestly, if that's what their senior officers look like, though, I can see why they're having so much fun. They're getting the ships they're getting at the moment. It's a cruel fact. It's a cruel point of fate, but it is true that if you are a more handsome person, it's far easier to get to speak on television and make your case. It is true. So, France, though, they're in a bad situation at this point. They are economically in far more trouble than any other nation, probably. They are dealing with a serious mental health crisis. Okay? Lots of people focus, when we talk about World War I, on the loss of life to the French. And that was devastating. But on top of that, you have the people who come home with physical wounds, who are handicapped, and the percentage of population, how that changes the workforce in the population. And you have the people with the wounds and scars you can't see. And there are people, of course, with a combination of both, who have both. That's an ongoing legacy you're dealing with. Now, on top of this, France is actually petrified, absolutely petrified, that there's going to be an Anglo-Saxon stitch-up. Whilst the Americans have been upset by Anglo-French negotiations on naval discussions, the Americans were very upset. There were some naval discussions between Britain and France in 1928 and 1927. It's terrible. Because, you know, who knows what they might do. It's bad enough that Congress aren't funding us. But what happens if they join up together? They would outnumber us and cause us trouble. And the British are still looking at the Americans going, we don't need the French to outnumber you. Your Congress manages to do that for us. We don't need their help. And have you looked at the French Navy lately? Have you seen a more unloved service in the world? Unloved? uncared for. Reading these books, you get a firm idea of where the French Navy comes in French national priorities. It's not very high up in this point. There's a lot of tokenism. Thank you, Simplified. Seneca and Carl Gasberg having a discussion about current French politics and the current French president. I would say you're possibly right, but in actual fact, in some ways, that's actually because of France being France, that's actually getting him hassle. He's actually being, he's almost being suspected because he isn't able to have an affair. It's almost the point of national pride, it seems sometimes, in some parts of French politics, that their presidents can have affairs. If they're not having an affair, it's almost a bit of a, oh, what's up with him? He's a bit weird. It's so unusual, it's almost disturbing. The French politics is special, okay? Every nation's politics has its own special facilities. It's like in the UK, we have a positive desire to apparently have your official position on a Greggs sausage roll. I have no idea why that's become a national barometer of whether a politician is in touch with the public or not, their position on the Greggs sausage roll. But just check how many politicians have been asked about their views on it and have been photographed eating it. That and eating a bacon sandwich. Don't worry, Drakenred. Anyway. It's now time for the shameless book plug. So this is the point where I say thank you to everyone for your support and your kindness. Thank you for making this channel what it is, for helping it have the stuff it does, for allowing me to buy books, for allowing me to do all the things I do. Today I was out of Iron Brew, and then, well, to be honest, the money from YouTube came in, and I went, woohoo! Buy an Iron Brew. Which was very helpful. It's a fun time I'm having at the moment. I am hopefully going to record. I'm keeping a note on all the videos I am behind. Currently, I am technically 4 videos not being produced while the laptop's been in charge, because the laptop, God bless it, it tries its best. But I timed it the other day, and to process a 1-hour video, it took 4.5 hours. When I put in a nearly 2-hour video the day before, I basically left it processing, and it processed it all night. And the reason is because it hasn't got much RAM space. And honestly, when you're processing videos, when you're editing them, you need a lot of RAM space, because it basically parks them and does multiple versions, does all sorts of things with it, and yeah, it's weird. So yes, I am fairly close. When a paycheck hopefully arrives tomorrow, because a paycheck is supposed to arrive tomorrow if it's on time, I will have enough money to buy the full PC stuff I need, the new case, the new PSU, everything. Hopefully it all arrives tomorrow. We all know my paychecks can occasionally be interesting, but fingers crossed it arrives tomorrow, and the new computer will be here, and then I will start getting back up with stuff. And there are things I need to do. There are books, successing books which need to be edited and finalized, which are going to be done on the PC. There are all sorts of things which need to wait for the PC, really, to do them. Thank you. I'd also want to say this. While I'm here, liking, sharing, subscribing, all those things on a channel really do make it help. Sharing of the videos, sharing the channels on social media really do help it grow. But the important thing is the notifications. You see, videos get promoted by the algorithm depending on how many people watch them when they first come out, in the first 5 minutes, the first hour, the first day. All those things matter in how the algorithm treats them. And unless you have notifications turned on, that you get notified of all videos from a channel. So on YouTube, for example, there's a little bell when you press the subscribe button. If it's just a outline of a bell, YouTube will decide which of those videos you get notified about. Unless it's a filled-in bell, you won't get notified of all the videos that come out. Then you decide. And that really does matter. I was having this conversation this morning, and won't seem strange for me to say I was actually having this conversation this morning with Drac. And we were talking, because both of us have noticed that there has been since March, there has been a downturn in the amount of money coming in from YouTube on various levels. I would say for me, I was never getting, because my channel isn't that massive, I was never getting that much money from advertising anyway, so I've noticed it to an extent less. But that's why memberships and super chats and super thanks are so important. Because they've always been the largest portions of any income I've received from YouTube. I've got a little over 15,000 subscribers. I am not going to, in the nicest way, if I was depending on advertising alone, based on a linear progression, I would not be able to I would not have the same level of income as I currently get from YouTube until I'd made it to about 90,000 subscribers. It accounts for less than a sixth of the money I get from YouTube. And YouTube is usually about £500 a month towards the research. Which is not an insignificant amount. Please note, that's a really useful amount. This is the point of it. I don't need much money for research. £500 covers a lot for me. A lot of it covers books, it covers some of the trips, and then you add in about the same or a bit more from Patreon. Patreon changes a bit because I have it rigged up to give things out to people in various cups and mugs and things, and I need to go and update all that soon. All those things out to people. It's really fun to give the things out. Those things. So basically, I'm a little over £1,000 a month in terms of funding. And I know you shouldn't talk about this because I get told off people to talk about it. And that's really helpful. And that funds all my research. If you consider, though, some of the books I'm buying are roughly £250, £300 per book, you can understand that that money, what that pays for the research, don't pay for much more. But that's a good thing, because that's what I'm doing this for. I'm doing this for the research funding. And that's helpful. It means I can do the research and I don't have to worry about funders, and in terms of the organizations you normally go to as an academic who will set criteria of what research methodology you should use, and that sort of thing. Then there's all sorts of little sort of restrictions which can come in with funding from those sources. Thanks to you, I'm independent. I truly am an independent naval historian, which I love, and so does Drac. But we have noticed that the algorithm has become very much focused on how you set your subscribe button on both YouTube and to extent Twitch. And more importantly, that we are more and more dependent upon your direct kindness, your direct generosity. And so I want to say thank you for that. I need more clickbait. No. I have never been a clickbait channel. And yeah, it's not my style. And Draco, to answer your question of what on earth did you do to that ear infection sick puppy, Alice was listless and miserable for a week after. He went for an operation, had it all cleared out, and what can I say? He's raleigh, but he's also got exotic, it's called, and it's apparently the strongest one out there, and the only one which is still capable of dealing with the resistant infections. Exotic. So this is what's being given to them. It's very good. Our vets, we have very good vets. We are very lucky down in Cornwall. We have very, very good vets. If you're ever in Cornwall and... Well, there are 2 veterinary surgeries which we use down in Cornwall. One further down, which are called Rose Mullion. And the one we use up here, which is called Red Roof. Red Roof Veterinary Surgery. And they are both excellent organisations. And excellent teams of vets. But if you're further down in Lizard, you're down towards the Helston area, Rose Mullion is good. If you're up this area, Red Roof is very good. I'm happy to, as simplified as I always said, I'm always happy to go on other channels. I'm always happy to be invited. I do Armchair Admirals, I do all sorts of things. If people want me, I am happy to go and invite them and discuss stuff with them and argue about that. I'm very happy to do it if they want me to. You grow up in Poscava, St. John's. Cool, simplified. Anyway, with that being said, let's talk about the world situation. Now, the thing is, you have to sometimes be very careful with how you approach the London Naval Treaty. Because if you're talking about a period before the London Naval Treaty, everything looks like it's getting better. Everything looks like it's on the up and up. Everything looks like the world is healing. However, it's only that way if you are that way inclined and you want a positive worldview. I decided to give you some particular images. You know, the fact is, when we talk about fascism and communism, normally we start talking about Germany and Italy and all these sort of countries. Well, British fascist, Oswald Mosley, the American examples. British communist / interesting leader, Walter Wall Hannington. Interesting character to look up in historically. If you wanted someone who's going to be very useful to the anti-communist cause in the UK, and I do not mean this in a rude way, because I'm sure he was devoutly followed his beliefs. But it seems to be every time he gets involved in campaigning for union stuff, he's usually quite successful. Every time he's trying to raise the profile of communism and trying to make Britain communist, he manages to backfire himself about 100 bazillion%. It's as if you've got the guy has great skills. It's almost as if there's something which the Communist Party's messaging just didn't connect with the wider British public enough. And on the top there, on the snap, you have William Z. Foster, who was the one of the presidential candidate for the Communist Party of the United States in the 1930s and 20s. He's a very special soul. He truly is. He truly is a very special soul. Anyway, the thing is, with all these things, barring the communists who'd started a bit earlier, and the Oswald Mosley here and the fascists, they'd all started a bit earlier. They'd all been around before the treaty gets signed. They're all starting before the treaty happens. They're all there before the treaty happens. It's just they're tiny. And World War II hasn't happened. And they look a lot bigger and a lot more powerful in hindsight than they do at the time. At the time, though, they are a symptom of the Troubles. They are a symptom of the issues. The Great Depression is, of course, based on the great boom and bust. There's been a boom in the 1920s, and then there's a bust. That boom is based on a lot of, the American industrial might coming out of World War I, but also a huge amount of loans, a huge amount of speculation on the world getting better and better and better. That's a problem. That's a problem. You see, if you're always mortgaging the future to get there, eventually, if there's any hiccups on your path to the sunny uplands, people are going to get nervous. Are going to go, well, is the future actually going to be as good as you've been claiming? And if it isn't, are you going to be able to repay my money? I don't know, but you can repay my money now, so I'm going to get money off you now. And that is the issue you're dealing with. You can keep mortgaging the future as long as you can persuade everyone that the future is going to be sunny uplands without any doubt, and is going to be constantly getting better. The future is going to be constantly improving. Then you can mortgage the future. But if there's ever any doubt, ever any worry, ever any demurrament, that's when you start to have problems. Because it's like building a wall of wet clay. As long as it holds, it's good. But the moment a brick falls out, the moment there's a hole, one hole, that hole just keeps expanding and expanding and expanding. And very quickly, your wall disappears. Your wall is gone. So this is the problem we have in the 1930s. They are doing lots of things based on sunny uplands, including the London Naval Treaty. If there is peace in the 1940s, if there is no World War II, no one would be so anti the London Naval Treaty. If there had been peace ever since there'd just been ongoing naval treaties, and maybe eventually the US had joined the League of Nations and the world had got happy and peaceful and stayed that way, no one would be sitting here saying the politicians made a bad decision. The trouble is, and this is the ultimate problem, is a lot of the politicians involved in the decision-making process here are also, within very short amount of time, involved in World War II. And one of the reasons why you don't hear as much about the London Naval Treaty as you do the Washington one of the reasons why it's quite so murky in terms of people's actual individual involvements is A, because a lot of it took place behind closed doors with no stenographers and no naval experts and no one to talk about it, but also, and this is the biggest one, because a lot of people within living memory found themselves being confronted with the consequences of their own decisions. Because the first reality of life is this: hope for the best, prepare for the worst, reality will be somewhere in the middle, and either way you're fine. That's the sensible course of action. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. If you're a politician, hope for the best, prepare a scapegoat for the worst. For most of the 1930s treaties, the stuff is blamed on Washington. Yet, honestly, it shouldn't be. Washington is the more famous treaty. Washington is the one which gets the books first. Washington is the first treaty, so it gets the blame. But Washington was in some ways sensible, whereas London Naval Treaty is in no way sensible. Because it stops nations and navies being able to react to events. To be able to adapt to events. Imagine a Royal Navy which is still held back on terms of, let's say, capital ship construction for a little bit longer. Because that would have been held back till about 1932, probably a little bit, maybe a little bit longer. Which doesn't have the treaty limits taking place in 1930. Imagine how the government reacts to the Great Depression. They'll just start building ships. They'll start replacing cruisers. The Royal Navy of World War II will now have a single cruiser which served in World War I. Why? Because they can literally build that many. The Royal Navy of World War II will probably have dozens of extra sloops as well as destroyers built between 1930 and World War II. In which case, again, You may even don't have the V&W conversion project. You might not even have the issues with needing all the flyer class because of the sheer number of sloops and vessels you already have in service. The issues are dramatically different. The world will change. But the politicians don't know the future. No politician knows the future. No human being knows the future. They're making educated guesses. Even when I talk about the future of things, I am making an educated guess based on information I have and my own reading of history and my understanding of how these things evolve, and I'm projecting that out. I'm not infallible. No politician is. Yet they are they have to make treaties and they have to make laws with the idea they do know the future. And this is ultimately their problem. And this is also the issue for the London Naval Treaty. So now let's look at the people doing the negotiation. And here is the fun thing. Albert Victor Alexander, 1st Earl of Hillsborough, is another character we get from the Labour Party leadership at this point. He's the First Lord of the Admiralty. He, along with Henderson, that's Arthur Henderson, this again one, are critical in getting Italy and France to sign up to the naval treaty. And this is the difference here with Mussolini. Mussolini, absolutely the most dangerous place in the world to be is between Mussolini and a radio microphone or a camera in any way, shape or form. But the thing is, he still knows how to write a writer. He will make demands, he will make requirements, he will make requests. You will not get him there unless you are prepared to pay what he is worth. We all know he's desperate to get there, but he also knows that you really want him there, and he will make you pay for it. Well, here's the thing about Albert Victor Alexander, 1st Earl Alexander of Hillsborough. He's First Lord of the Admiralty from June 1929 to August 1931. He sides with Henderson when they resign in protest over restrictions put on the unemployment benefits. But then he returns in May 1940 to May 1945. And also took in the role in August 1945 to October 1946. So think about that. Think about him in World War II, being the senior politician in charge of the Royal Navy in World War II, and him having to explain how to naval officers, whenever he's meeting them, without admitting it, that the reason they don't have the ships and equipment they need is because in 1930, he believed the world needed to rearm to stay peaceful, and that they were not going to have another war again, so it didn't matter. And can I tell you how I know the rearmament is based in it not having another war again? Because if it was really based in preventing war, there are at least two other powers, possibly three, who should be signatories on this treaty. In 1930. Anyone want to guess who those powers are? Anyone want to guess if it was really about peace, not about disarmament in favour of spending the money on other things, and a belief war wasn't going to happen, which other powers they would want signing this treaty? Anyone? I'm opening this up to Twitch and YouTube. There are chats. Germany and the USSR? Yeah, that's still them, but there are three powers. There are three other powers. USSR and Germany, yeah. Canada's on there. They're a member of the British Empire. So is Australia. 3 other powers. Germany and USSR, already there. Japan signs the 1930 London Naval Treaty. They don't sign the 1936 one, 1936-37 one. Italy's going to sign, simplified. Turkey, King Badger, you're on the right track with Turkey. You are on the right track with Turkey, but not Turkey. China. Chile. Ottomans? Brazil? Well, China's navy really doesn't count that much at this point. China should probably be on there, yes, but as I said, their navy doesn't count that much. Brazil, Chile, and Argentina, again, there's various funding issues going on. But if you want an armaments treaty in this period, and you want to restrict the world's armaments to battleship tech, which is the other country which can build a battleship? Which has the technology that can build a battleship? In this period. You mentioned Russia, Germany. Okay, Italy. They can build it. Spain is iffy on that one. They probably couldn't build it. They don't have it. Sound is funny. Sound should not be funny. But things are being interesting. It's almost at 25%. Sweden! You are correct, Semi-Paragraph. And Plains Fox. You are correct. Sweden. No, the Dutch can't build a battleship without anyone else's help either. The Dutch can't. No, knight. It's Sweden. If you are honestly building a treaty which is about restricting naval armaments and restricting the world's threat of battleships, at this point, Sweden. The Soviet Union and Germany should all be in this treaty. All 3 of those powers have the technological base and infrastructure to be able to build those ships. Yes, Spain built baby dreadnought stand, but Spain built those with so much help from other outsiders, it was almost embarrassing. I know, that Fleet goes on about them a lot, and I realise that now today the situation has pretty much reversed itself, thanks to Sweden's infrastructure development and investment. But in the case of the dreadnoughts period, especially that time, they have issues. Sweden has all sorts of capabilities. The thing is, Sweden has the tech base to do it. They don't build them because they don't need them for their security, but they actually have the industry and infrastructure. And if you look at every time either America, Britain, or other powers involved in this are listing off the nations in their intelligence systems which could actually build a battleship, Sweden is always amongst them. So the thing is, the contemporaries rated Sweden could do it. And that's the only real answer, only real question we need to answer. Exactly, Summer. They didn't build them. But the thing is, Sweden has a massive armaments industry and massive steel industry. The only thing they are short of, they also have a lot of shipbuilding experience. They build quite a lot of cruisers and destroyers for their size. They build up their own defense forces. They build up their own systems. The only thing they really lack to do it is the size of dry dock necessary. But as far as the contemporaries were concerned in their intelligence, Sweden was capable of doing it. So it's kind of a weird scenario. I do agree, Exomariner. But the thing that's the scenario they're looking at, and it's kind of like, how do I put it? I'm trying to think of today. It was similarly, Canada today has one of the world's largest nuclear industries, right? They do. They have one of the world's largest nuclear industries. In many ways, their civilian nuclear industry is big enough that the big shock is they went for diesel-powered submarines rather than nuclear-powered ones. It's the reverse of Australia. Australia's got virtually no nuclear industry, and they're now going for nuke subs. Canada has a massive nuclear industry that they can draw information from and support from and start, and use facilities they can use, and they're not doing it. Well, Sweden's example at this point is that they have the armaments industry, which can build very big guns, and they do. They have a steel industry which can manufacture the finest quality steel. They have naval architects who can build very good ships and are often consulting on designs around the world. And they have quite large infrastructure, but they don't have anything quite big enough. But with a little bit of development, they could do. Would you say it's fair that Greece had the need but not the tech? Yeah. France is the world's biggest civilian nuclear structure, but Canada is top 3. Canada is one of the world's, especially for its size, it's got a massive nuclear industry. It's one of the things that's often forgotten about Canada. We were looking at who put hulls, not who had a tech to. Yeah, that was the point. Sweden is always rated highly as a nation capable of doing it if they wanted to. That's one of the interesting things about Hoi 4 games, by the way. If you ever play Hoi 4, Sweden has all sorts of naval capabilities in it, and people often found that surprising. And you start looking at history and you realise, oh, frigate, they had all this infrastructure industry, they didn't really use it. And that's the thing. Sweden builds infrastructure industry, especially in this period, like other nations build actual weapons of war. And that's the thing that's always going through most nations' head when they're talking about Sweden, is that they know they are one dry dock away from being able to build battleships. One dry dock. One slipway. And they can do it. And the reason Sweden don't? They don't need to. And they also don't have a massive population to support it. But if you then look at the cruisers they build, and those cruisers are some very fine-looking ships, finished post-World War II, have a look at them. Look at their lines. Look at their qualities. And you go, oh. And then there's the Gotland and other vessels, They produce some really good ships. And also, there's the example we tend to use as Småland, which is how do I put us? Well, as we talked about before, the basically floating Bofors catalogue. Excellent. Rule of thumb, every country that has nuclear weapons has nuclear submarines. No. That's not a good rule of thumb, because I can list off my head at least 2 countries which we are fairly certain have nuclear weapons and don't have nuclear submarines. And there's a good chance there's 3. So, I can understand where that comes from, but it's not. It's sufficiently not the case to cause issues. Yeah. And well, I'm mentally going through my head list, and I have We all know, of course, that Taiwan was part of the same program as Israel and South Africa, but apparently, even though they were the largest population, the most pressing need, having China against them, and the greatest technological base to build it from, they were the ones who didn't develop nuclear weapons, but Israel, we're fairly certain, did, and South Africa definitely built nuclear components. We have North Korea, and we have Pakistan, and yeah. Sorry, I should have put it around the other way around. Countries that have nuclear submarines have nuclear weapons. Yeah, that I will accept as a rule. But Australia is probably going to become the exception to the rule, but that'll be the only exception. They'll have nuclear weapons housed. That one works though. Yeah, it's the old thing of Australia does not have nuclear weapons. No. Not at the moment, is what we should say, because we don't know what the future brings. And so, in terms of discussion, we've gone a bit off the point, but we actually come back to it because we're trying to talk about how complicated the world was in this period. The thing is, what are these people looking for? Are they looking for peace? Well, that's certainly what Henderson was looking for. Do they believe that building up large forces of defences are a danger to that peace? That's certainly what Alexander seems to be pushing for, but we're never quite sure of him because he's a very capable politician and you're never quite sure he's saying what he actually believes. And then you have MacDonald, who has got lots of plans and a fine vision of the future he wants to bring about. And his negotiation style from the get-go is about what he can deliver. And it's really interesting when you start to read the papers how it's almost projected by the Americans especially as he's caught between his own backbenchers, the opposition party and the Admiralty. And there's poor MacDonald who's who's basically being pushed from pillar to post by them and has no control at all over the situation. He's the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And the people who he's negotiating with believe him to have no control the moment anything goes public. No influence the moment anything goes public. That he will be completely wiped out. He will lose all influence over the situation, all control of the situation, should his backbenchers catch wind of it, should the Admiralty catch wind of it, should the opposition catch wind of it. And that's a problem. That is a problem. That means that it's surprising that he succeeds as much as he does. One can only argue that he does as well as he does do for Britain, especially in the agreements he gets from the Americans, especially really the cruiser tonnage. Because ultimately, they have to get him on side. They have to get Britain. If Britain doesn't sign up to the treaty, and MacDonald realises this, there is no treaty. And the thing is, Congress won't fund the US Navy. As long as Britain doesn't do a massive capital shipbuilding program, and don't start doing that, then Congress won't care. Congress went full Mahanian, but it was their version of Mahan. Not what Mahan was selling, but their insistence on what they believed Mahan meant. And what they believed Mahan meant was very different than what he actually meant. They believed he was talking about the power of the battle line. Everything comes from the big gun. And you want the biggest gun. Oh yeah, you want a lovely big gun. Lots of lovely big guns to represent you on the world stage. Guns which are going to be girthy and big and show how powerful you are and project the status of the politicians of your nation as great statesmen with big, girthy barrels. And that's what they're focusing on. And so, honestly, that's the sad thing. But that's the reason why McDonald has the power he does, despite loans from American government banks and all sorts of things going on, especially after the Great Depression starts. All those things that come into it are realistically not the problem for the Americans, not the advantage for the Americans, because they know if Britain doesn't sign up to the treaty, for whatever reason, and let's be honest, if there's enough outrage in the British public press, then that gives MacDonald a reason to withdraw. As long as MacDonald doesn't authorize building capital ships, and the Royal Navy's not stupid, they know they don't need to increase the number of capital ships. They can be retiring those 5 extra capital ships and then start building them, much just like what actually happened. Retire the 13.5-inch gun battleships and then start retiring the R's and replacing them. All those things can be done, and the odds are the American political class will just ignore it, as long as they feel they have big guns. And that was actually something I guess one of the reasons why the British are looking at possibly smaller battleships, and battleships with 14-inch guns, 12-inch guns, 15-inch guns, all sorts of things, in the scenario leading up to London, 1930s, because they're looking at a post-treaty scenario if there's no treaty. What happens? They're honestly working out what they could maybe sneak in without the Americans noticing it. Because if you think about it, if you could get a whole load of 35,000-ton fast battleships, which are, or let's say 33,000-ton fast battleships armed with 9 14-inch guns, okay? It's less than the American ones are carrying. But if you can get 12 of them launched and no one in the American public is really noticing, that can give you a huge advantage. Or maybe it's 9 15-inch guns. As long as it's not as big as theirs, it can be got through. So that's where his whip hand comes from. And he uses that. He uses that shamelessly. And that's why you get the British being able to do a build-up of destroyers. And why the British get to do a build-up of submarines. And why the cruiser agreement comes in the way it does. But what did the Americans get out of it? Well, Stimson is an interesting negotiator here. He is not the Secretary of State just about yet at this point. He is sent out, he goes out, he's been the Secretary of State for War, and he will later on be the Secretary of State for War again, under Roosevelt. He has been Governor General of the Philippines, okay? And he is between that appointment and his appointment as US Secretary of State. So he's currently between appointments, and he's sent out as negotiator for the treaty. So he is a career Republican politician. He's a lawyer. He's, again, as non-military as you can get at this point. He is there to represent America. He is there to represent Hoover. And his plan-managed thing is this. He wants a navy which is second to none, with parity. Parity with the British. That's the important phraseology. He doesn't want to give up any advantages from the Washington Treaty. And most importantly, parity, Washington Treaty advantages. It's got to look like a win. His requirements are entirely political and are based more around the Royal Navy than they are about Japan or the needs of the US. How can I tell you that? Well, because the amount of debates which go on over number of light cruisers versus number of heavy cruisers. And we all know for the US Navy, they need more 8-inch cruisers for their roles and their missions. The 8-inch cruiser suits their needs and requirements far more. For the British, they need the 6-inch cruiser. Why? Well, for Britain, it's about global trade going around a global empire, which means there's lots of trade not going back to Britain, but trade from Australia to India, India to South Africa, South Africa to South America, South America to Britain. All sorts of different stop-offs on the way in between and going around the world. It's a sodding nightmare, okay? You need to protect this. You need to defend it. So for Britain, the light cruiser, the 6-inch gun cruiser, which they can build in decent numbers and, have enough vessels to go out around the world doing protecting these missions, is the critical asset. But for America, where they sit with the Atlantic on one coast and the Pacific on the other coast, most of the trade they're talking about is going backwards and forwards between them and somewhere else. Which means the problems, if they're dealing with them, are going to be on the other side of that ocean. Which means when you get there, you want to have firepower. You want to have a solid fighting force that's going to absolutely muller them. That's what you do. You don't need presence around the world for that. You need a mullering force. You need something which turns up, takes names, after it's given them a good kicking. That's it. There's a difference there. Basically, one wants their cruisers to be a version of the really reinforced area car on the beat. Not the local, plodding policeman walking up and down the street. Not the foot patrol policeman, or even the local car. We're talking about the area car, which is usually a slightly faster car, which is bigger and has a couple of big policemen in usually, or the equivalent, sort of rapid response, the motorway, the traffic, and the high-speed pursuit police, those sort of things. That's what they want our cruiser force to be. For the Americans, the cruiser force are the riot squad. They turn up, you're going to remember it. And you better hope that they have dealt with you before the mounted police, aka the battle fleet, turns up. That's the whole thing. Or the National Guard, whatever you want to consider the battleships to be. And that's the scenario you're dealing with. That's a very different need for their cruisers. That results in a very different desires for those cruisers to look like. So trying to achieve parity with those is not going to help either. You're going to limit the number of ships the Americans can have for their riot squad, and you're going to limit the number of ships the British can have for their presence. Oh, great. So, the display decided to go again. Let's see if we can work it out. And we're back. This is a new habit it's developed. It hasn't had this habit earlier. It's developed a new trick tonight of the display port going. Life is fun. So with that being said, this leads them into all sorts of issues. Okay? Their pursuit of parity, their pursuit of status means they agree to all sorts of things they really shouldn't, which really aren't good for American needs. I would argue that for America, getting into a situation where they're accepting continuing on with their carriers being so limited in numbers, and for Britain, exactly the same, it's stupid for both of them. If you're not going to increase the capital ships and you're going to retire more, that's fine. If you really want to commit to do that, that's fine. At this point, capital ships are definitely worth what you're building them, but you know, that's on to you. But they all know the growing importance of aircraft to reconnaissance. We all know the world's oceans are vast. We all know the issues they have with patrolling the world's oceans. Yes, it does sound and look like it's overheating. I'm actually watching temperature stats. I have all them in the corner. But leaving that to one side, Steve. All these issues are still going through, are still breaking everyone. And that's a tyranny of geography, so why not build more aircraft carriers? And one of the really interesting things is that no one seems to consider, well, why don't we go, how many light cruisers do you need, Britain? Okay, that'll set the light cruiser number. And how many heavy cruisers do you need, America? And that'll set the heavy cruiser number, or the 8-inch gun cruiser. Because imagine if the Americans had gone, well, we want 25 heavy 8-inch gun cruisers. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll build that. And the Royal Navy had gone, well, yes, we need 45 light cruisers because we need 70 cruisers. And the US Navy had gone, okay, 45 light cruisers it is. And they'd gone, right, so tonnage differential would do from, okay, we're going to say 10,000 tons maximum for each. Oh, yeah, that'll do. So that's 250,000 tons of heavy cruiser and 450,000 tons of 6-inch cruiser. 250,000 tons of 8-inch cruiser. Or maybe they do, well, 300,000 tons, 30. You need 30 heavy cruisers and 45 light cruisers, let's say that. And so it's 300,000 tons of heavy cruisers and 450,000 tons of light cruisers you're able to build. And imagine that made under this agreement in 1930. Both Britain and America get the cruiser forces they want. Everyone gets to build cruiser forces in relation to that. And at the end of the point, you have probably by about when World War II breaks out, a very large and capable cruiser force in both the Royal Navy and the US Navy, which would look at everyone and go, you really want to play this game? Imagine a world where the Royal Navy has 30 county-class cruisers at the outbreak of World War II. And maybe 24 town-class cruisers. That suddenly makes the world a far, far more interesting place. But no one thinks about that. They're always thinking from the perspective of, we're here to save money, realistically, but they want to achieve their political goal of, we want parity. So they achieve it by cutting. They achieve it by weakening themselves, limiting themselves, which is a decision you only make if you believe in peace being the only logical long-term outcome. And then we have Japan. We have Japan. 64 years young. Had already served as Prime Minister. Would go on to serve again as Prime Minister. Wakatsuki Urishiro. A career bureaucrat, lawyer. One of the really interesting stories about him is that when he and his aide and 2 bodyguards fall into the water because his boat disappears underneath him, it's his aide and him who can swim, whereas the bodyguards can't. And so it's his aide and him, and this is when he's 66 years old, who keep the soldiers afloat long enough, the bodyguards afloat long enough they can be rescued. Yes, as a 66-year-old man, he keeps his bodyguard afloat long enough they can be rescued in the water. He is He is a truly special character and a truly interesting and capable individual. He fulfills the role of Chief Delegate Parliamentary. And remember, there are two things coming in here. One, he's there to deliver cuts. Secure the Japanese position, but hopefully prevent the Japanese Navy running up huge bills. On top of that, and perhaps more importantly than that, he's there to protect Japanese infrastructure. He's there to provide a future for Japan. You could argue that this is the most earnestly peaceful of the groups coming to here, but honestly it's not. That's going to be the French. But they're also the most earnestly completely over their heads. He had failed to join the army, I think it was, due to health reasons, and I think possibly the Navy as well for similar reasons, but not quite sure about that one. But he does spin a good tale. And he's been sent as a representative, and it's worthwhile noting that he is a democratic political representative of the Japanese government. Sending him is a very particular position. Sending him gives status. Thank you, Robert Diamond. Did the US negotiators privately suspect Ramsay MacDonald's socialist leanings influenced his willingness to compromise British naval strength during the 1930s and London naval treaty negotiations? Robert, I don't know if... Well, let's put it this way. There's nothing private or secret about Ramsay MacDonald's socialist leanings. He was the Labour Party leader. He is a socialist. They did believe that he had plans for money and didn't want to spend money on defence, but they also viewed him not as essentially, as I said, as being not necessarily as being as powerful and able to bring it about, because he's riven between. He's having to. He's got a compromise with both his own backbenchers, who are a mixture of trade unionists and socialists. And there is a difference between those two groups. A trade unionist might be a socialist, but a trade unionist doesn't have to be a socialist. A socialist is often a trade unionist, but not always as well. And so they don't always completely overlap. They're not one circle. They are two different circles. And as said, the various factions I discussed already looking for peace in his party. So yeah, he's there. He's interested in peace. They know he wants to get these things, but they also know he has to balance not just his own party, but the Admiralty and the opposition. And he's a coalition government leader as well. He's got the Liberals in his government, and Liberals are known to be interesting when it comes to naval spending. So, yeah. They might hope it would affect it, but they know they can't necessarily rely on that for help. With the Japanese, it's also about buying time. Honestly, again, if the London Naval Treaty doesn't work out and the whole Washington Treaty and everything fall apart in the early 1930s, the world gets very interesting very quickly. Because we think of Japan as not being ready for war in 1941 when they end up going to war. Look at Japan in 1930. Imagine Japan and going to war in similar timeline after there's been no treaties for a decade. Imagine the world that's produced. Imagine the naval power that's being produced. Imagine the capabilities that are on the table. That's not good for Japan. That's really not good for Japan. Germany might be cooked, yes, Knight, you're quite right, but Japan's really in trouble, because here's the other thing. I've already alluded to this, there is a great big elephant in the room who's not in the treaties, called Stalin, who is another of those interesting dick dictators of the period. Anyway, as a dictator, he, like certain US congressmen, is really concerned about having a girthy representation on the world stage. He truly is. Battleships are all the rage where he is. He really feels that a hard battleship is what he wants to have. And so if there is a naval construction race starting in 1930, well, for starters, there is a goodly chance the Nelrodsky gets built, because that's probably the most conservative option of vessels that the Soviets could build, and that's available in that period. So yeah. And if the Soviets are building battleships from 1930 onwards, the odds are, whilst it's not going to be quick, and I'm not saying they're suddenly going to, but the thing is, if they start in 1931, they probably have something in the water by 1937. And the thing is, if they have a couple of battleships or any other battleships of, entering the water, that's just going to make the whole nightmare for Germany, for Japan, that much worse. Alright. So would the pretending to comply not happen and building what they want? Yeah. That's pretty much it. The thing is, if you have no treaty, you just build what you want. But the trouble is, if you're building what you want and everyone else is building what you want or what they want, then you have no breaks. For the Japanese, the treaty serves a very interesting break on not just them, but on everyone else. It allows them to build up their own infrastructure, their own technology, whilst not having to deal with the costs of a naval race on top of it. It's all the history that is. But if we move on, we get to this gentleman, Dino Grande. Dino Grande. Minister for Foreign Affairs, who would eventually have to leave Italy after being the leading proponent of the notion which removed Mussolini from power in 1943. That is a problem. That shows you where he's coming from. You see, this is the interesting thing about Mussolini's government in some regards. Mussolini has a lot of people who are true Italian patriots in it. And whilst Mussolini is, and I don't agree with their politics, but they are Italian patriots, and I want to emphasize that before we get into this, in that they are very proud of Italy, and they think it deserves a place in the world, and status in the world. And the thing is about sending someone like Dino Grande, is he's going to make a strong case for Italian strength. One of the interesting things that usually comes about when you start looking at the treaty limitations and etc. that come from the London Naval Treaty is when you realise that, hang on, Italy and France aren't part of the submarine limitations. Italy and France aren't part of this and that and the other and various things in the treaty limitations. And that's largely thanks to Dino Grande. And basically, France having policy of not agreeing to be in anything which Italy isn't. And Italy actually doing a very good job of defending themselves. Now, what was Italy after? Italy's after recognition, but more importantly, Italy's after being a dominant player in the Mediterranean. Mare Nostrum, remember. Mare Nostrum. Now, there are other factors going on here. There are their own factors, their own infrastructure limitations, and their own financial limitations, their own economic issues, which they were starting to recover from before you start to have the Great Depression hit. And they've had issues from World War I. They were just as badly mauled in many ways as the French in World War I. And HVN, just a small point, stop giving Glyn Stewart ideas in this chat. You know, in the nicest way. He will create a book about Planet Jimmy going to war with Planet Jesse, because that is just too ripe setup for you not to take. So, you know, my advice is, if you're going to write the stuff, don't put them in the chat. Go and write the book yourself, because otherwise there are science fiction authors who watch this channel who will take that idea, run with it, and make a lot of money. And you should make your own. You make use of your own ideas. Now, the thing is, Italy's also got limitations in infrastructure. They can either build battleships, or they can build cruisers, or they can build a carrier. They need to work on all these things. And that's their problem. They've always got a lot of plans, a lot of ambition, but they haven't got the infrastructure to it. Basically, it's similar to Japan, but they haven't got the war fight. They haven't got the open war between the armed services going on. What they've instead got is a lot of people trying to argue with Il Duce and trying to explain to him exactly what they need to do. And him not paying much attention to them. Because, well, if I told you, one of the things that Il Duce did, which I find the funniest thing at all, is to give people the impression that he was working late into the night. He'd leave the lights on in his office, even when he left them. This got into such a habit that sometimes when he was out at the opera, or was out doing some other fancy social occasion, his office lights would still be on as if he was back there working. Which, of course, kind of highlighted the fact it was a ruse. He couldn't have been there working, because he was off doing something else. But the trouble is, with all their ambitions and all their limitations, it is juggling things. It is juggling so many issues for Italy. The biggest one I would say is one of infrastructure. They lost a lot of people in World War I, and they are suffering from that like the French. But they also don't have the infrastructure the French have, because for Italy, if you consider them, they have a large population concentration north, on the plains and north, but if you ever played any railway games, etc., were settled in Italy, you'll soon know that there is a huge amount of mountains and various other interesting terrain as you go further, march yourself further south down Italy. And realistically, you needed to be building a lot of infrastructure to make Italy work. And Mussolini was always talking a good game of infrastructure, but not always delivering it. And they did a lot of great big projects which actually ended up causing a lot more issues long term. Sending Dino Grande to the treaties meant they had a good diplomat there. They had someone who was arguing their case and getting them the strongest position possible. But the thing is, one of the reasons why Britain, especially, wasn't worried about giving them those positions was that they knew they couldn't necessarily follow through on it. Or rather, if the Italians did follow through on it, and this was the interesting thing, the Royal Navy, the British politicians didn't recognise it, the Royal Navy did. The Italians might actually try and deliver on these things and would actually build up a capable navy. The thing was, the Royal Navy knew they had such limitations on infrastructure, they'd take so long doing it, the Royal Navy would see it coming. And that's the true advantage. That's the true advantage. And then finally we have France. Oh, France. There are so many issues with you, it's beyond belief. It is truly saddening to see the issues. The fact that André Tadiou, the Prime Minister, came himself, honestly came to sign, conducted a lot of negotiations himself personally, are honestly because he couldn't trust the rest of his government. Okay. Right. You know, he believed in peace. He believed in building a France of peace. And this channel is a history channel, not a modern politics channel. The moment you start regging into there, you will be muted. And modern politics is okay for brew ships on a Sunday, not for normal history videos. I'm sorry I have to make that case, but it's because of the monetization rules on YouTube and the way YouTube runs itself. So I have to be fairly strict on it. I can make a few comments and few asides, but I have to be able to draw the line somewhere. Basically, I can be rude about politicians. I can't get involved in the policy debate. Potentially Melanie, but you know, I'm just having to be quick, having to shut it down before it starts something up. So, yeah. Now, leaving that to one side, André Tadiou. He's honestly trying to get the best deal he can for France, but what his view for France is that they need to rebuild themselves. He really doesn't want to spend money on the armed forces because the French government and French politicians ardently distrust the armed forces. If you ask most of the French political class who the greatest threat to France were, they would say their own armed forces in most of the 1920s and 30s. They really would. And that's a problem. If you've got to the point as a government where you no longer trust your armed forces, then that means you no longer trust your own people. Because your armed forces are not made up of robots, they're not made up of foreigners, they are made up of your own people. Yes, they might be a volunteer force, in which case you might be more likely to get one group than another group turning up in your forces. That is a reality. That is a reality, and we do understand that. But, and this is the really critical point, that doesn't mean, I have to emphasize this, that doesn't mean you can stop trusting them. You need to work with them. Your armed forces are your national security. are your national defence, are your are your safety, are the facet which, as said, provide that deterrent, because you don't have an international police force that keeps nations in check. You only have your own forces. That's your deterrent factor. That's what allows you to be a pacifist. That's what allows you to have a peaceful life. Your armed forces. So if you really don't trust them, do you purge the general officers and the admirals? Do you purge the officer class, the NCOs? What do you do something? You don't just keep not funding them, not keep investing in them. The French Foreign Legion was the most trusted. Yeah, actually, that's the undisturbing things, but also the French Foreign Legion is the least supported and the one which is most often kicked overseas, far away from home. The French Foreign Legion is the French answer to the problem of how do we fight ongoing wars and counterinsurgency wars with an ongoing loss of life without having a loss in support in our population? Oh yes, we have a load of foreigners we've recruited do it for us, and if they get killed, well, we've given them new names, we don't know who their family is, and frankly their family don't vote in French elections. So, no bother to us. Why the distrust? Honestly, French history. But also, it's when you've got rid of the Prussia-German enemy, when you've got rid of the threat of an outside military power, and there are not going to be any more wars because it's always peace. What's the point in having your armed forces? Your armed forces become a scary thing that you don't need. They become a vestigial, organ which might hurt you, kind of like an appendix. And that's the reality of the French armed forces. But he was truly terrified going into the negotiations of an Anglo-American stitch-up, of an Anglo-Saxon stitch-up. He honestly perceived Washington had been a British-American stitch-up of the French nation. So this is a really interesting scenario when you have the negotiation going on, because you have a government which honestly would like to defund its armed forces completely because it doesn't trust them. Worried that its closest ally, which is Britain at this point, has stitched it up in a negotiation with another power to disarm it or weaken it, which is fighting for its navy, which is therefore fighting for its naval strength to be preserved, even though it wants to get rid of it. And actually, it hasn't been stitched up by the other powers. They've just been sorting things out because Britain and America knew that if they didn't negotiate things between each other beforehand, then everything would get stuck down between them in the fight. Get stuck between them in the dog fights in any negotiation, and therefore would derail it, because the sheer size and quantity of British and American naval forces means that there is far more room for debate between them than it is for others. Lance, this is not meant as modern politics, but a lot of this is sounding very relevant to current ways of thinking. Welcome to the problem, and I think this is what poor HVM possibly ran into, but there is a thing which is supposed to come up at the beginning of the chat, etc., especially on YouTube, explaining modern politics are only allowed in brew ships, and I do that because brew ships is structured that way, and I have things clicked up on the advertising rules so they know it, so it just doesn't cause me trouble. It's just, YouTube is fun to work around, okay? There is a reason why a lot of people who do live streaming go to Twitch, even with Twitch's rules. And I like both, which is why I do both. I like to say hello to the Twitchers, and hello to the tubers, and hope you're all having fun. And so, honestly, the French go into this in a complicated mess of a mindset. And unsurprisingly, they come up with a complicated mess of a naval solution. That never appears. Thank you for telling me that, Knight 6831. No one had told me this. I will try and fix it so it appears. Because there are supposed to be rules which appear for chat. Rules for chat are supposed to appear. It might only appear the first time you sign in, you come into the chat. I don't know, but I'll sort it out. I'll get it to start popping up. No one reads the video descriptions, Knight. You know, I know that. Because the amount of comments I get asking me for a link to the Discord server, which I know is in the video description. So, no. I am firmly of the belief no one ever reads the video descriptions. Hi, Lions, and hi, Jonathan Moon. By the way, YouTube's now currently having a debate about the French Foreign Legion, which I seem to remember might have French officers, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm never quite sure the officers in the French Foreign Legion come from the French army or not. I would have to go and do some research, and honestly, they're an army, they're a land force, and there's a very limited. There are certain parts of land forces I'm interested in certain land groups I am interested in, and there are others which I'm just go. The French Foreign Legion were there. I haven't bothered researching them too much. I should probably go and research them all. Ah, there you go. Community, welcome to live chat. Remember to guard your privacy and abide by our community guidelines. Okay, I'll have a look into that, because honestly it's supposed to list the guidelines. We'll sort that out. So, with that being said, I'm fairly certain this is the last slide, so that was an introduction to the leadership of so tempting to put that up there, but I know YouTube would find that annoying and would say I was doing nasty things, so I'm going to put this one here. I'm going to pause it there. So for questions, and take questions on the topic and any other general questions you have. You have Brewships 1901 open in front of you. That is Brewships 191. Oh, that's better. That's okay. I'll check. I'll go through and check that the guidelines are showing up. Internal promotions. A significant portion of officers in the Legion are promoted from the ranks of Legionnaires. Ah, thank you. Thanks, Leslie. Thanks, Tanif. Foreign Legion has changed in recent decades. Yeah, they have evolved, but I still remember the Russian gent who walked through the Channel Tunnel to get to there. Who literally got on a boat, I think, to Britain, got out of Britain, and managed to walk through the Channel Tunnel from Britain to France to join the French Foreign Legion. I managed to do it. Walked the whole way along the tunnel. It's a wonderful story. I only managed to order 2 bottles of Iron Brew. Here's the thing, okay? Today I had, of course, unwell doggies, so I decided rather than leaving them on their own, especially with other people going out the house, I would order Iron Brew by delivery. Do you know delivery only limits you to buying 2 bottles of Iron Brew per order? Because apparently they're worried you'll overload the driver. I don't know if it's just me who's so limited, or everyone else is limited. But I'm only allowed to buy 2 bottles at a time from Deliveroo. It's terrible. It's cruelty. No lions. Very generous of you, but no. Besides, in nicest way, I'm fairly certain you might not just be seeing me when we do the pickup of Fleet's computer and that transition in May. Because we're doing it in IKEA. We're going to meet up in IKEA, if I remember correctly. My mum might be coming with me as well. It could be fun. I think he went through the maintenance tunnel, Melanie. At least I hope he went through the maintenance tunnel. Atypical promo. Did the politicians consider damage the treaty would cause employment in their shipbuilding? No, because most of them believed, well, A, the Labour Party were planning on paying some yards to close down to open up and support the more efficient ones, and B, they believed that the sunny uplands of constant economic growth would mean there was going to be large amounts of merchant ships built, which would mean there would be plenty of employment in the yards which were kept going, so they wouldn't need the ship and the naval construction to keep it going. The laugh is you can order 2 Iron Brew, 2 Coke, and 2 Pepsi. Yes. Get meatballs. I'm always buying meatballs. Team. I get a lot of them. 4 bottles for every hour's delivery I get. Oh, Paul, you're rubbing it in now. Let's go, everyone. Will Fleet get his new PC before I get my new bed? I'm hoping to do it by the middle of May for his new PC. Hey, Sarah, that was me thinking you were drinking Scrumpy Jack. Nope. I hear good things about it, but I don't drink alcohol. This is me sober, believe it or not. Soft drinks only. That causes some fun and confusion with some viewers, but I literally, my dad was a very good naval architect and a very good person when he was sober, but he gave me a first-hand look at what it was like when you weren't in control of yourself with alcohol, and I decided I never wanted to be that way. Call it enhanced cowardism. And I promised my grandfather I'd never do it, so I've never drunk. I basically made that promise when I was 11 years old, 13 years old, between that point, I think. And I've never not. I've never drunk since. Before then, I came from a Scottish-Cornish family background, so yes, I'd had a bit of whiskey at Christmas and a bit of this and that, so I had drunk, but, not massive. But, yeah. Never since then, never touched anything. Soft drinks are my weakness. They're why I need to spend a lot more time in the gym than I do, but I'm allowed back in the gym, so I'm going. You can really see the difference which free 15-minute doses of gym, free 15 minutes in sessions in a gym a week are doing for my body, can't you? You can really see the difference. Luckily, I'll build up, and they said I should be allowed back doing full swimming soon, and so I'll be allowed to do an hour swimming or 50 minutes at the gym. And hopefully I'll be able to build up, and eventually I'll be able to back into an hour in the gym and an hour in the pool. Or an hour in the gym or an hour in the pool every day. Which is usually what I like to be for my health. Which is where I was pre-COVID. I don't pursue a 6-pack. Please note, I'm never going to get there. But I do like to be a healthy weight of round about 90-ish kilos for my size. Theoretically, I should be down at about 84, 85, but I look, let me put it this way, the moment I got dropped below 88, I look like a skeleton. So, I tend to go for about 90, and I'm fine. Melanie, why was I banned? I was banned because of, my getting over my pneumonia. As part of the treatment, the doctors, I managed to make, I got really ill with the pneumonia. I managed to make myself really, really ill. So yeah, I have to be. That's why I've had to be. This is what I've been dealing with since now. And also the other trouble is I'm allowed to do 15 minutes gym a day now, as well as doing the DIY and stuff I was doing. It used to be a case of you could either do a couple hours of DIY or do 15 minutes in the gym, and now I'm allowed to do both. And so I have been just doing the DIY. And as much as the DIY does help, honestly, DIY doesn't give you the same level of exercise as going to the gym does. Especially not me, because I like things like... My favourite thing in the gym is the Jacob's Ladder, okay? I know there are people who really don't like it, but I love the Jacob's Ladder. I find it the coolest thing ever. I put a backpack on with... well, actually, I have a weighted... Actually, do I have it around me to show you? Yeah. Here it is. So, I have a full 20 kilogram weighted vest that I stick on, and I do the Jacob's Ladder with as much weight as I can keep going. And it's wonderful. And that's how I get fit. And I walk dogs as well. When the dogs are well enough to walk, I also walk the dogs. Please note when I will say when well enough. Raleigh hasn't been well enough for walks recently, so it's just me and the corgi usually go. But yeah. Robert Dents. So gunboats like area class, they were exempt from numerical limitations, given you could fit 6-inch guns. Why would no one choose this clause? Because everyone needed gunboats. And because, let's be honest, their fighting value versus other warships is virtually nil. So, in a naval battle, they are absolutely useless. But for supporting amphibious operations, doing riverine operations, they're really quite useful. But you're only going to build so many because they can't help you with much else. Thanks, Robert Dennett. And leave it to Alex. This gym machine isn't hard enough. Would it be more difficult with 3 dogs and 50 kilograms strapped to my back? No, but I have quite literally got a corgi backpack for the corgi. I haven't ever put the poodle in a backpack, but I have put the corgi in a backpack. And I did used to occasionally go to the gym with the corgi, because if there was no one else to watch him rather than leaving him alone, especially when he's ill, the gym didn't mind him coming as long as he stayed in the backpack. So I'd be wearing my 20 kilogram, have him on the backpack on top of that, and I'd be doing the Jacob's Ladder, which, if you don't know, it's basically an endless climbing thing. And I would do that I did that for 45 minutes usually. That was as long as I could sort of keep it. 30 minutes most times, but sometimes 45 minutes, especially if I was going to do that. I would do that for 45 minutes, because that's a really good workout. Would get my whole body nicely pumping, would really burn off a lot of calories, set me up for a nice day, and then I could go and do some weights for about 15 minutes, and that was my hour. Robert Dennett, could you stretch the definition of gunboat under U clause to make some type of useful warship? Have a look at sloops. That's the Royal Navy's equivalent. Then they basically go, the 6-inch gun isn't that helpful in a vessel that size. But we can do some really interesting things with twin 4-inch guns. We can make something which is a minesweeper, mine layer, and ASW escort to free up our destroyers. So yeah. Also, the Dutch were quite fun as well with that. Jonathan Moon, one last strike. Couldn't that country have pulled off the Mare Nostrum? Why not? Italy couldn't because of France and Britain. At certain points, of course, the Roman Empire had been Mare Nostrum, and at certain points in history, in the 19th century, Britain was pretty much de facto the king of the Mediterranean. but often it was Mediterranean is too important a seaway, too valuable that it's so contested that no one can really do it. The thing is, Mare Nostrum is able to be completed by the Romans because they are the only power in Mediterranean. By the point it's Mare Nostrum, it is the Romans control the entire Mediterranean coast and are the only power in the Mediterranean. Blackles, what's the difference between 6-inch and 24-inch? Basically, it's ability to load and aim it, okay? So 6-inch requires, because of the ranges you want to engage at, because the power of the gun, all these things require a significant amount of stabilization to be able to aim it accurately, and so a sufficient amount of work. Whereas a twin 4-inch, you can often actually aim, stabilize manually. You can be dealing with it just by the people involved, and can do so at a speed which can provide you with a level of firepower which you can actually achieve hits through targets. Remember we were talking about I was talking about Narvik recently on the Armchair Admirals in the invasion of Norway, and I talk about how Narvik is such a brawling battle. Well, what you have to imagine is that you're fighting at close range with someone who's the German battle destroyers are pretty much the equivalent of, they are a heavyweight boxer in terms of their arms on a lightweight body. So they got like the massive power, but they are sort of overstretching, almost overdeveloped. And you've got the other person is another of the other destroyers. The British destroyers are lightweight boxers, but everything's in proportion, so they can keep getting jabs in constantly, and that will wear down their opponent because they will get more hits. And that's the thing. You can't. That's the issue they're finding with if you're in that kind of close quarters combat. And again, we're twin 4-inch versus 6-inch. Which do you want to engage a submarine with? Well, a 6-inch might hit it further away, but it's going to be a very small target, very close to water. You might not see it that far away. Whereas if it's closer, it's probably going to be in range of the twin 4-inch, and you're more likely to hit it. Lions. Then what was Warspite in that situation? Warspite was a giant metallic fly swat going whump occasion on people if they were proved too annoying. Four-inch or 6-inch, sorry, both for mission kill. Yes, but a 4-inch is more likely to hit it. Because, especially with the technology we're talking about in the 1930s. And twin 4-inch is more likely to have a far higher volume of fire than a single 6, especially from a sub 2,000 ton platform. I can hear a corgi woofing away. I'm wondering why corgi is woofing away. Give me a second, I'm going to check corgi's okay. Find out why corgi was woofing. Found out why the corgi was woofing. This is what you claim is your magic treatment, isn't it? Bringing a 50 mpg Maya against a slug-loaded semi-automatic shotgun. Pretty much, yeah. Wump is a good description. 15-inch shell landing. Yeah. Warspite versus Yamato one-on-one. I bet on Warspite. I would not want to bet because on the odds, Yamato should win that one. But Warspite, you have to remember, is the vessel which literally did do circles in front of the entire high seas fleet. So, yeah, there is sufficient plot armor on Warspite's side that I don't want to take that bet. Now, yes, I know I'm not supposed to be giving him days, but, you know, he's been outside and been a good boy, so he deserves one. And the thing is, no one's quite sure where you are in the house now, do they? No, they don't know. You good boy. How you feeling? Up we go. Oh, good boy, up we come. You say hello to everyone. So, 4-inch shell is about £20, 6-inch shell is about £112. And that's the difference also. It's hand loading, the speed and rate of fire, and it does enough damage against the submarine. All you need to do is damage the pressure hull and the submarine's not going anywhere. Yes, well he can't have lots of them, but he still gets some for going outside and being a good boy. He's just not getting them instead of his food. What are you talking about?
Oh, I'm trying to joke. Don't joke, it's not funny.
Don't worry, he's here.
Oh, yes,
We heard Zebedee woofing and we worried about him. We went out and found Brawley sitting there. So you want him back? You worried about it?
Well, Mum was really concerned.
Well, Zebedee was woofing non-stop and I thought this would stop him. Go on, go to bed. Go to bed. Oh, I don't know. I've had it, buddy. I shouldn't. We are both adults, far too close to 40 to be doing those things. But you know. Besides, my poodle was left alone. He was lonely. He needed the attention. So, last 10 minutes, and any questions, please do put them in, and I'll try and answer them, and then I will go check on everything, and then I'll pop into Discord and chat away with people for a few hours if people would like that. Answer questions on Discord. Thank you again to everyone who's supported me and supporting this channel and helping it grow. Thank you to everyone who's done the donations towards the new PC. I had a friend of mine who is he keeps actually trying to get me to go work with him actually. He does IT for a big education site not far away from here, and he came and sort of looked over my stuff and allowed me to take my tower into his office and check the systems out to check if my small equipment, my handheld piece of equipment, little one, was about the same, getting the same results as his far larger piece of equipment, and the answer was yes. And somehow, the diagnosis is the PSU is gone from being certainly fine to being just this side of the line fine, so it's worthwhile replacing it. It still works, but it's fine enough. It's okay to leave it. It's not a fire hazard at the moment. It's not fine enough that you want it ongoing, as it could quite easily migrate down to worse. Somehow, and he's not quite sure how, the motherboard has not only managed to damage its connection to its graphics points on the board, but it's also managed to damage its BIOS settings. Theoretically, they're not supposed to be able to be completely wiped. It has somehow managed to do that, and yeah, it's a fun thing. And CPU seems okay, according to his tester. But it won't fit on the new motherboard because you can't get CPU motherboards really for CPUs of that age anymore, that are sort of up to dealing with the modern workflow I'm going to be pushing through it. Other than I get the same motherboard again, and honestly, the differential between buying that motherboard and that CPU again, brand new as a set, and buying the one I'm buying, which is an upgrade on it, is £150. So it's worthwhile getting the upgrade, because frankly, moving on to an AM5 chipset is going to give you more future proofing, and it's all issues. But yeah, I was very happy that all my they were actually slightly annoyed because they actually, to get them to allow me to use their machines testing, etc., I had to make a bet against them. And they bet me that they could fix it, and I bet they couldn't. I told them exactly what I thought was wrong with it. When they found out that I was right about what was wrong with it, They owed me a pizza, so they had to buy me dinner. So I found out my computer was really stuffed and unfixable without new bits, but it was also I got a pizza out of it. So there's win some, lose some. Was previous CPU name for yeah, pretty much. Um, so Article 12. I'm thinking of something sneaky, Dr. Clarke. Okay. Oh yeah, don't worry. I've dealt with most of the Article 12 ones. Lions, in your equitable treaty, I think it was. So I said equitable. You did. Would you change any of these people for different members of their respective governments? You can't really do that. Once you start, the thing is, with the equitable treaty, I put together what an equitable treaty would look like. But the moment you start doing, it wasn't so much an alternate history as me trying to give you a standard of how we would work out where the treaty diverts from what's equitable. Okay? Because you can't describe, and this is one of the problems you get into as a historian when you're doing analysis. You can't just say this treaty is bad and not be prepared to provide a definition of what a good treaty would look like. You can't say this treaty is unfair and not be able to provide what a fair treaty would look like, or an equitable treaty would look like. It's usually the phrase we use. Fair would be everyone gets treated the same. Equitable would be everyone gets treated within their expectations, with enough leeway that everyone sort of feels, sort of broadly speaking, happy. But they don't. No one feels really spectacularly happy with the treaty as they want it, but no one feels unhappy about that, if that makes sense. And so that's the scenario we're talking about. Robert Dennett. So, since auxiliary ships are exempted under the treaty, tonnage limitations, correct? Yes, but they have some restrictions on them. In terms of number of guns, etc., and things they can carry. Ex-Samurai. Funny, I stumbled across the War of Jenkins' Ear the same day your dog got an ear infection. I couldn't help but chuckle. Oh, good times. But yeah, that is a chuckle. It was on name text-to-speech wouldn't do it for me. Don't worry, Lions. I was just clarifying it so people, if they wanted to look it up, Sirius could know what to look up. Rob Dennett. We register a 18,000 tull Harlser fleet repair ship, have leave empty machinery workshops whose deck foundations and cable runs just enough to match twin 340mm Zorents to shore as spare parts. Tempting, but we'll probably get issues. Walter Brodus, you've never met Trump. I actually have. I've met Trump a while back, but I have, and I've met Clinton. I've met quite a few of the U.S. and British political leaders, and some of the French no ones. The great thing about being at King's College London when I did my PhD was all sorts of people would come to visit various parts of London, and you'd get the PhD students and people would get invited. And again, longer term, as I connected with Kings, I get invited. So I've met quite a lot of these people. When I'm talking about them, I have met them. Wouldn't say I know them. I wouldn't say I understand them on a personal level, but I've met them and I've said hello. So I've had that level of experience with them, which just puts me at sort of a different level than some. It's a very cool idea, Old Dennett, but unfortunately I doubt it will get through. This is a bad treaty. A good one would obviously give me everything I want and nothing to anyone else. Yeah, that's the trouble. That doesn't work. History doesn't work like that. But we do have equitable treaties to draw from to be able to show what an equitable treaty would look like. And one of the interesting things is it's not just historians who do that. Normally, if you've got a properly functioning foreign office or foreign service, before you go into negotiations, they will draw up what they think an equitable treaty for everyone would look like. And they will draw up their estimations of that, of what an equitable treaty will look like. And that's then what you go in basing some of your positions off. You base off what you need, but you're also looking at equitable treaty, so you know what you can give ground on, what the others might expect you to give on, and what you can possibly succeed. But the thing is, standard point in diplomacy is never give anything away for free. Never give anything away for free. Standard point in negotiation. If you're doing something that you haven't been asked for, you are either doing it for credit, because you were going to do it anyway, and this way it gives you a political status and clout, or to try and push someone else into doing it and doing similar. But never give away anything for free. Wait, you met? Yeah, I met Trump years ago. The thing is, you all know me as the guy who sits in my office, or used to be a long time ago, in my bedroom and talks naval history to you with a pile of books around me. There are a few videos of me suited and booted on here, but very few. But the other side of my life, where I'm lecturing in universities and when I'm doing that stuff, yeah, I'm reasonably presentable. I will probably put there's a video going to be done soon, and I'll probably do an outtakes video for you all. Oh, I'm doing a new one for past preservers for me on TV shows. And yeah, that's part of my life, is being suited, booted, interesting person, turning up at dinners and other, events up in central London, because I used to live in Epsom, so 40 minutes roughly on the train from central London, so we'd often go to these big events at Roosie, at all sorts of places, and would meet the people and would argue with them. It was what I did. And wrote down, it feels like a Navy could abuse the heck out of a Clause 12, is so inclined. Why wasn't done? Honestly, they did, but the trouble is there's a limitation to what you can do with it. Because you have to remember, you can anything you do in the clauses, anything you abuse out of them, can be abused by others. So you don't want to do it too much. You still got a pile of books from me. Yeah. Lance, so what you're saying is, by changing any of the members of the treaty would be such a different version of the treaties, it wouldn't be historically accurate to try and make it an equitable one. No, it wouldn't be. You add in, let's say this. The one I often do is what happened. I did an interesting one a while ago of what happens if Stalin turns up on the London Naval Treaty. And the odds are the London Naval Treaty doesn't happen if Stalin's there. Because what Stalin wants will cause so much disruption that no one will end up signing. Because anything Stalin would agree to, Stalin would want parity with Japan at least. He might even want to claim parity with Britain and America. And that's just not going to be acceptable. And so that will cause the treaty system to collapse. So these treaties only work because of who the countries at the time we're talking about and the countries which are members of it. And yes, the poodle is probably the boss. Really, this is the poodle string. Don't say that too loudly, the poodle will believe you. Second question, with your new books that are coming out, are any of them going to be an audiobook version? Honestly, I am considering recording an audiobook version of a couple of them. And I might well do that, especially for I might try it out for the Flower Class Corvette one and see how it goes. Right then. With that being said, any questions before we finish? Yeah, the fact is the Panzer and all sorts of things were Weimar Republic. One of the often myths of the interwar period is the Weimar Republic was not involved in its own rearmament programs. Trust me, they were involved. The money doesn't come from nowhere, and whilst you might not have all the politicians involved, there are enough that it is done. Right then. Barry, you seem very interested in asking people their country's names. Um, it happens. But I'd say, due to the fact that most of the people in this channel are able to deal with me sufficiently talking wacky enough English, the vast majority of them probably come from countries where English is taught to a very high standard, or have lived in countries where English is taught to a very high standard, to be able to deal with my wackadoodle English. Okay. Right then, with that being said, and I think and I'm not sure, but I'm having this strong suspicion Fairy is a bot account. We'll leave that to one side. I'm going to go. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you found it interesting. And Nightbots come in. Yeah, that's the trouble. You run into Nightbot, Nightbot will hit, and Nightbot hits you. That's the point of having the bot. It's cruel. But it is even-handed. Sorry, I hope you're not a... Hey, if you're Fairy, if you are not a bot, we do apologise. If you are a bot, well, bot versus bot wars have happened already. So what we got coming up? Well, next week we have Emperor Pertinax, the Admiral Emperor. And after this... after this, yeah, I'll be popping into Discord. But thank you very much, everyone, for your support. Thank you, everyone, for turning up and chatting away. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you found it interesting. And just, yeah, thank you. And take care, and thank you for all the things you have done for the channel. Fiddles.